Okay, welcome back. So in the last video, we saw 4 new commands: git init, status, add, and commit. All very useful, especially add and commit you'll use all the time. But all that lets us do is add in files and commit them, save them basically, make little checkpoints. To actually go back, view old code, we're going to see 2 new commands, git log and git checkout. And I'm actually going to show you a few more, but they're not as essential as these 2. So I'm in the same folder. If I type, let's start with ls, you can see I have those 3 files. If I type git status, I haven't made any changes. And if I take a look, let me just reopen them. C9 app.js. And let's do cat and dogs. I don't know if I've shown you that before. You can just chain them together like that. Okay, so we have these 3 files. The dogs one is empty. That's fine. Let's suppose that this is a huge app and I somehow mess something up and I get an error. So I do something wrong and my code no longer works. And again, pretend it's a big app and I don't actually know what the problem is, or maybe I was trying something out and I decided, screw it, I don't actually like that. Let's go back to my old version. So the first thing we want to do is type git log. And this will give us a history or a log of all the commits that we've made in this repo. So quick note, it opens up this kind of new terminal interface where if you hit enter, it's actually going to scroll. You can use the up arrow as well to scroll through, but you can't type regular commands right now. Notice how the cursor has changed a little. There's a cursor, or there's a colon right here. To get out of this, you can type Q. So I'll go back, git log, and let's start at the very beginning, so at the bottom. First thing I did, you can see first the author, the date, the time that I made this, and the code that I ran, which was, or the commit message, add app file. And then the next one was add cats file, and then add meow to cats, add dogs file, and that was, oh no, we had update files as well. So yes, they all have times. The messages though are really important, and they need to be descriptive, especially if you're revisiting code, you're coming back to it after a while away. But the most important part, as far as Git is concerned, the actual commands that we run, we never actually type these commit messages again. They're just for humans. But the important part for Git, for the computer, is this commit hash here, this long string. It's really, really important because that's the unique identifier. So that's what, if I want to go back, I want to look at the code from the very beginning, add app file, back in time, I need this. So I'm going to copy that. Let's say I want to go back all the way until when I just had the app file. No cat file, no dogs file. I copy this here, Command C, and I hit Q to get out. And then we're going to see the new command, or the second new command, which is git checkout. So I type git checkout, and this is a really versatile command. It's used for a lot of different things, but the general idea is that it's used for just going and viewing something else, going and checking something else out, whether it's a branch or it's a previous commit. We haven't talked about branches, by the way, but it's often used to do that, to change branches. So I'm going to do git checkout and then paste that long string in and hit enter. And actually, before I do that, let me get out of there and just type git status. First thing I'll see is that I did make a change in my app.js, which is fine, but I didn't stage it for commit. I didn't add it. But more importantly, it says on branch master. Again, we don't really know what branches are, but all that you need to know for now is that master is our home base. So everything we've done has been on master. Okay, and I also have this little git prompt here. On my command line prompt, it says master. So now if I do run that command, looks like I lost it. Let's type it again, git checkout, and paste that, and I hit enter. First thing you'll see is that it's telling me I have changes that aren't committed. And if I check out this, if I go back here, I'm going to lose those changes. And that's because Git can only keep track of so many things at once. So I have some changes right now. This one line that I made, And Git is watching that and saying, do you want me to commit this? Do you want me to add this? But if I go back and I view some old code, Git is not going to know about this anymore. So it's basically warning me, before you go back, you should probably add and commit this, or get rid of it entirely. So just don't care about it, just overwrite it. I'm going to add and commit though. So I'm going to do a git add app.js, and my commit message will just be mess up app file. Type git status, nothing to commit, still on branch master. Now let's try and check that out again. This time we get a much longer message. Most importantly though, notice that it no longer says master right here. It gets cut off because it's so long, but if I type git status, I see head detached at 5cdd blah blah blah, which is the beginning of that hash. Okay, so in my opinion, this is where Git starts to get really confusing. This term head here, it's always confusing to most people I know, including a lot of developers. It's basically a pointer think of it as a pointer in space or in time, the current place where you are. And you can move it around to move back and forth through time. What's important though is that we're no longer on master. So what we've done is we've gone back and we're basically checking out, we're inspecting the old version of the code. So if I type ls, this is what's pretty cool about Git, I now only have one file here. So when I went back, when I checked that old code out, it basically transported me back in time. It took me back and I can see what I had back then. But it is important to note that when I do a checkout like that, git checkout and then the name, the commit hash, if I do that, it kind of takes me out of the current flow or the normal workflow of Git. That's why it says head detached. So if you imagine our history as a Git history as sort of a timeline that looks like this, where each one of these O's is a commit. Just do a few more. Okay. Oh, geez. There we go. So each one of these is sort of a point in time where we committed, and it's in a sort of a linear list here where we started at 1 and then we made some changes, committed again, and there's a flow to this. This is where we were, the last commit. This is what is known, currently at least, this is where our master is. So I'll just write that, master. This is where we were before we made this git checkout command. Then I ran git checkout and this commit, and it took me all the way back to, I believe, our very first commit. And it told us that head detached at that commit message. So that means that master is still here. We haven't moved this master back. What we've done is kept it there, but we've detached the head. And again, I do think this is very confusing. What's important is that basically we've added in this idea of, let's just say head is right here. I'm not sure why that changed the syntax highlighting, but head is here, but we left off here. So we have unfinished business over here. So what we either need to do, and it's totally up to us, usually when we use checkout, it's to just go look at some old changes to check out our old code and then go back to where we were. So think of it as hitting the pause button on the code that we had, and then we checked out some previous code, which is where we are right now, and then maybe we copy a line or two, maybe we view a note that we wrote to ourselves or look at some old code, and then we go back to master. And that will fix the problem of head detached. It's not really a problem, but it can be, because if I start making changes right now in my app.js and I try and add and commit, we'll run into a problem, which is that it's not going to know what to do because we have master here, we have head here. We're going to have to make a decision. So usually what we do is we check something out, inspect it, look at it, view some code, and then go back to master. Sometimes though, you want to just go back to an old version and revert, which basically means go back and just start at that point in time rather than just checking it out. So before I do that, let me just show you how you go back to master. So again, git status says that we're head detached on this long string. I can do git checkout master, and that takes me back forward in time. And now first thing you'll notice, those files come back. If I type ls, I now have those 3 files again. And if I type git status, I'm on branch master. So we took a little trip backwards. Half of us was up here, half of us was back there, and then we went back to master and everything is happy again. All right, but let's say I do want to go back. I want to revert back to, let's do git log, to before we added the dogs file. So this commit message where we added in meow to the cats file. So we should have the cats in the app file. And I just want to go back to that. So I don't want to just go check it out and look at it, but I actually want my code to reflect that state. I want to add a new commit that says we reverted back. I'm starting over without the dogs file. So this would be like if you scrapped, a big part of your novel, or you want to just go back before you added in user authentication or before you added in Bootstrap, and you just want to go back and just start over at that point. And the unfortunate thing here is that there are a lot of ways of doing this. And before I actually show you some of them, I'm just going to show you one, but before I do that, I want to add a note here about how developers use Git. Most developers, and this is definitely generalization, but most developers are very comfortable with the common workflow that I've been talking about: status, add, commit, status, add, commit, over and over, maybe checking out something. Developers will work with branches. But when it comes to reverting back to old code, to undoing something, to deleting changes, whatever it is, that's something that you actually don't do all that often. It's pretty rare that you abandon, your current code, especially when you're on a bigger team. It's not that it never happens, but those sort of things are not the norm. And I would say that most developers don't know how to do that off the top of their head. Or they might know one way of doing it, but there's 5 or 10 different ways of doing it. So the way that people use Git, again, is that they're comfortable with a lot of the basics, the bread and butter commands, maybe 5 to 7 commands. And then one day someone will have to do something they don't know how to do, and they just research it. So something like Stack Overflow is really, really helpful. And if we look, I have a Stack Overflow post I've included as a link. There's a question here. How do I revert from my current state to a snapshot made on a certain commit? So how do I go back to an old commit? Not just check it out like we saw, but how do I actually revert to it? And there's probably 20 different answers, and none of them are the same. So I'll just walk through some of them. You're going to see some of them are multiple lines long. Some of them will ask you, or some of them will have you basically destroy any of the commits that you've made before you revert back. Some of them will keep the commits that you have. There's lots of different ways. The one that I'm going to work with is this one here. It's nice and short, and it's pretty easy to do. What we do is we type git revert --no -commit, and then the commit that we want to revert back to ..head. And as you can see here, it says this will revert everything from the head back to the commit hash, so back to whatever commit we provided, meaning it will recreate that commit state as if every commit since had been walked back. So that's not as important. And then the --no commit is a flag that tells Git just to revert all the commits at once rather than doing them one at a time, which would then ask us for a message for every single one. So rather than doing that, we can just do --no commit. It will revert everything back, and then we can run git commit and give it a message like reverted back or undo changes, whatever we do. So let's try it out now. Let's go back here, and I'm going to copy this into the notes so you have that there as well. Just paste it here. And again, this obviously needs to change depending on your commit. So I want to go back. I think I just copied something else. I don't have it on my clipboard anymore. I want to go back to when I added meow to cats. And let's just take a quick look at what the files look like right now. So dogs is empty. Cats has meow and purr. And app.js has all of this stuff. Okay. So now if I try this line, first always type git status. And one thing that's worth noting is that if you try and revert and you have changes that are uncommitted, so if I made a new file or if I changed something in dogs.js and I tried to revert, Git would warn me. It would say, you have uncommitted changes, what do you want me to do? So most of the time you just add those changes, commit them, and then you would revert. Okay, so git revert -- no - commit, then paste that string in -- head. Yes, I know this is a lot. No, I would never remember this myself. Use Stack Overflow. You find it online. Again, use your Googling skills. It is as I mentioned, something that you don't do all that often, but it is important to know how to find and figure out how to do it. Not that you need to memorize this at all. So git, commit, add, init, those are worth memorizing, but something like this, revert -- no commit, I wouldn't waste your time on it. Okay? Notice what happened over here. You can see we have app.js and cats.js, but dogs is gone. Let's look at cats. It only has meow. Let's look at app.js. It only has single line, this is my complex app. If I type git status right now, you'll see that we actually have some changes that need to be committed. And those changes are what basically just changed. When I reverted back, it deleted the dogs file and it changed app and cats.js. So let's add a commit. And we don't need to add, we just need to commit. You can see it already says changes to be committed. And also it tells us you are currently reverting commit and then the commit message. Okay, so what we'd usually put in here is revert back to, and then you could either paste that long hash right there, that string, or you could give a commit message or a point in time. Revert back to before authentication broke. Revert back to before Bootstrap added. And then hit enter. Now I type git status. We're on master, nothing to commit, working directory is clean. I have app.js and cats.js. It is important to note that I don't just lose everything. If I did want to go back to when I had the dogs file, I could do git log, and you'll see my commits now look like this. Very first one, add app file, then add cats file, add meow to cats, add dogs file, update files, mess up file, and then revert back. So even though I no longer have the dog file, basically the state that we were in here, I do have this commit. So I didn't delete it, I don't lose it. I can revert back to that at any point if I wanted to. So Git's really, really powerful, and I think it's also really intimidating when you're starting out, when you see something like this. So I debated showing you reverting. The reason I decided to do it is because even though you don't do it a lot, I think it shows you what you can do with Git. That with a single line, maybe 2 lines, you could have 100 files and you could revert back to when you had 1 file. Or you could have 100 files that were all filled out with 1,000 lines each, and you could revert back and they might only have 1 line each. You can use it, it's really powerful, especially when you're working on bigger projects. So I debated showing it to you though because I think it's a little bit intense. It's a lot to see, and something like this, it's not easy for anyone to remember or anyone to just know. So I don't want you to get that impression. I know I'm a broken record here, but don't freak out about this line. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this workflow, add, commit, status. If you want to, you can check out old code. You can revert if you need to. Just take a look at the Stack Overflow post if you ever need to do it. What we're going to see next is how GitHub plays into this. So we've seen how we can use it locally. So I could work on a project, a novel. I can write my novel, add little checkpoints with git add, git commit, and then I can go back and look at what I had, or I can revert. But now what if I wanted to put my code, put my novel up on GitHub so that other people could share it, other people could read it, other people could edit it, they could get it on their own machine, make some changes, and then share that with other people. So that's what GitHub is used for, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.